The sound of rain tapping against the window was almost hypnotic, a soft drum that matched the rhythm of my heartbeat. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the dull beige walls of my childhood room, trying to make sense of what had just happened. It wasn't the storm outside that unsettled me. It was the storm my family had created inside the house. Grandma's gift. That's what it had been. A simple, unassuming savings book, leather, bound and worn at the edges. She had handed it to me with trembling hands the last time I visited her in her small, sunlit apartment. "Keep this safe," she whispered, her voice barely above a sigh. "One day it will matter more than money." I had smiled, kissed her wrinkled forehead, and tucked the gift into my backpack, promising silently to never lose it. But somehow, in the chaos of our family's indifferent life, it vanished. It had been years since Grandma passed, yet I had kept the savings book like a secret treasure, buried deep in a drawer beneath old notebooks and childhood sketches. I had trusted my parents to respect it, to honor the memory of the woman who had spent countless nights knitting scarves and telling me stories of resilience during harder times. Yet betrayal had a strange way of arriving quietly, unnoticed, until it slammed into you. That afternoon, the truth had hit me like a lightning bolt. I had returned home from school, eager to share the new sketches I had been working on, only to notice Dad sifting through the garbage bags in the driveway. Curiosity, mingled with dread, had drawn me closer. That's when I saw it. The leather cover of the savings book, torn, water-stained, and discarded. My chest tightened as if someone had wrapped it in iron chains. I called out, voice shaking, "Dad, what are you doing?" He looked up, a startled expression that quickly twisted into irritation. "It's just old junk," he muttered, tossing the book aside. "Your grandmother's money isn't going to save anyone now. Why keep it? Why keep it?" The words echoed in my mind, a cruel mockery of everything Grandma had ever believed in. She hadn't given me that book for convenience or practicality. She had given it to preserve hope, to safeguard a legacy she knew my parents would never understand. And now, in a single careless moment, that hope had been crushed under the weight of indifference. I didn't cry at first. Shock had frozen me, leaving me silent and trembling. My mother appeared behind Dad, wringing her hands nervously. "Honey, it's just money," she said softly, trying to soothe me. But her words were poison. Money, it had never been about money. It had been about respect, about love, about memory. Anger rose in me, hot and raw. I felt betrayed by the people who were supposed to protect me, who were supposed to protect her memory. How could they not see what they had destroyed? My grandmother's gift had been more than a book of numbers. It had been a symbol of faith in me, a silent promise that even when life felt cold and unfair, someone had believed I could carry something precious forward. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the rain, feeling the weight of anger and sorrow intertwine. The injustice festered inside me, a seed that refused to die. I remembered Grandma's words, her gentle smile, the way she had held my hand when I struggled with the simplest tasks. And I realized something that shook me to the core. They didn't understand her, and they never would. But I did, and if they couldn't honor her memory, then maybe it was up to me to make them understand the cost of carelessness, the price of betrayal. I didn't yet know how, but a plan began to form in the shadows of my mind, a quiet determination fueled by grief and righteous anger. Grandma's gift had been buried once, forgotten in a drawer, but I wouldn't let it die here in the trash. Not if I could help it. Somehow, some way, they would pay. Not just for the book, not just for the money, but for every shred of respect they had thrown away along with it. The rain continued to fall, soft but relentless, as if the sky itself had decided to weep for what had been lost. And for the first time that night, I felt a strange, fierce clarity. Betrayal could be paid back, and sweetness could hide in revenge. The next morning, the house felt different. Not physically, of course. The same peeling wallpaper, the same faint scent of old wood and detergent. But in the spaces between, I could feel the tension, like static electricity before a storm. I moved silently, avoiding my parents' eyes, tasting the bitterness that had settled like a permanent shadow in my chest. School offered little comfort that day. Each lecture, each careless joke of my classmates seemed hollow, distant, like I was floating in a separate reality where loss and betrayal mattered and nobody else noticed. I kept thinking about the torn leather cover, the pages of the savings book soaked and smeared, the careful arithmetic my grandmother had maintained for years now reduced to a messy, forgotten heap. That evening, I found myself wandering aimlessly through the attic, seeking refuge among the relics of my past. Dust motes danced in the streaks of sunlight through the grimy window, and I ran my fingers over boxes labeled in my grandmother's neat handwriting. Christmas 1998, sewing projects, letters to the future. Each label reminded me of her patience, her meticulous care, and my parents' reckless disregard. Then I stopped. My gaze fell on an old trunk tucked into the far corner, one I hadn't opened in years. It was heavy, made of oak, and locked with a small brass latch. Something stirred inside me, a memory sharp and vivid. Grandma had once told me that some gifts were too precious to leave out in the open, that the most valuable things are often hidden where only the worthy will find them. I tried the latch. It resisted, stubborn and cold, but then, with a little force, it clicked open. Inside were stacks of yellowed letters, old photographs, and beneath them, another small leather, bound book. My heart froze. This was it, the rest of the savings book I thought had been destroyed. Somehow, my grandmother had left a secret, a backup of hope, hidden away. The realization hit me with a mixture of triumph and sadness. My parents had no idea. They thought the book was gone, discarded forever. And yet there it was, resting in the shadows, a quiet testament to her foresight and my own vigilance. My fingers trembled as I lifted it, feeling the weight of history, of trust, of betrayal and redemption all in one object. For the first time since the discovery, a plan began to take shape, not a rash, angry outburst, but something slow, deliberate. I would not confront them immediately. That would be too easy, too obvious. No, this required patience, cunning, and the kind of sweet justice only carefully calculated revenge could deliver. I would make them understand the value of what they had thrown away, not with shouting, not with tears, but by letting consequences unfold in their own lives. I spent the next few days observing them, noting habits, weaknesses, and patterns. Dad, with his habitual arrogance, believed he could dismiss anything inconvenient. Mom, with her timid compromises, never challenged his decisions. Both were blind to the quiet influence of memory, of legacy, of love unacknowledged, but I had a weapon they didn't, knowledge. I knew what they had destroyed, and I knew what they had ignored. And now I had something they could never take from me, the truth intact and undeniable. Late at night, I sat at my desk, the hidden book open before me. Each page was a reminder of what had been at stake, of the value my parents had so casually discarded. Numbers, deposits, small handwritten notes in Grandma's careful hand, they were more than currency. They were a moral compass, a measure of care, patience, and respect. And I swore silently, with a fire that warmed the chill of betrayal, that I would wield this knowledge wisely. It wasn't enough to grieve anymore. Grief was passive. Revenge, subtle and thoughtful, would be active. Every step I took from that moment would be guided by the balance of sorrow and strategy. I would not destroy them in anger, but I would make them feel the absence of respect they had so carelessly ignored. And so, in the quiet of the attic, with the rain pattering gently against the roof once again, I made my first promise to myself. This was only the beginning. Grandma had entrusted me with more than money. She had entrusted me with justice. The storm outside mirrored the storm within me, soft, relentless, and inevitable. Days passed like slow, suffocating waves. The house felt smaller now, every corner a reminder of what my parents had carelessly discarded. I moved through it like a shadow, observing, learning, calculating. Their casual laughter in the living room grated against my nerves, the same voices that had dismissed my grandmother's gift, her love, her care. And with each laugh, the fire inside me grew warmer. I began my small experiments in patience. I watched my father meticulously from a distance, noting his pride, his arrogance, and his overconfidence. He believed that authority and control made him untouchable. He didn't know that knowledge could be a sharper weapon than any anger. My mother, ever timid, followed his lead, a shadow glued to his decisions. They were predictable, and predictability was a tool I intended to use. The hidden savings book remained under my pillow at night, and I handled it with reverence, tracing Grandma's handwriting with trembling fingers. Each page was a map of love and foresight, a quiet testament that I alone had preserved. I began to write my own plans beside it, careful, deliberate, like planting seeds that would bloom into consequences they could not ignore. It was during dinner that I tested the first ripple. Dad had poured himself a glass of wine and began speaking about a reckless investment he had made, a new car he insisted we needed, even though the old one still ran fine. I feigned interest, asking questions, probing gently. "Dad, what would happen if something went wrong with that investment?" I asked, my tone casual, almost innocent. He laughed, brushing me off. "Nothing that matters. I know what I'm doing." But I had planted the seed. Over the next days, I kept dropping small hints, subtly reminding him of the savings book, of financial responsibility, of foresight. I didn't confront him. Confrontation was too crude. Instead, I whispered Grandma's principles into the gaps of our daily life, letting him sense, without seeing, the cost of careless action. Mom was easier. She had always feared making mistakes, and the weight of Grandma's memory pressed harder on her conscience. I left her small notes, an old receipt from Grandma's favorite shop, a photograph of her smiling with the book in her hands, the phrase "value the unseen" scribbled in the margin. She read them quietly, a slow understanding dawning in her eyes. But I kept my silence, let her feel the guilt without speaking it aloud. Let her wrestle with the knowledge that she had failed her own mother. At night, I allowed myself only a few minutes of reflection before sleep took me. The book rested beside me, a silent judge of our household. I imagined Dad's arrogance slowly cracking under the weight of subtle consequences, Mom's regret simmering beneath polite smiles. I felt a satisfaction unlike anything I had known, sweet, tempered by grief, sharpened by justice, and yet I knew this was only the beginning. Revenge, I realized, was not an explosion but a slow fire. Each careful action, each subtle nudge, would build toward a reckoning that they could not ignore. I envisioned the day Dad would finally grasp the depth of what he had thrown away, the magnitude of carelessness, the cost of indifference. It would not be loud, it would not need anger, it would speak through consequences, through the silent weight of memory preserved while disregard was punished. One evening, I placed the book carefully in the desk drawer, next to the papers Dad had used for his own investments. It felt symbolic, a quiet alignment of truth against folly. When he reached for those papers in his usual overconfident way, he would sense the presence of something important, something he had overlooked. And the realization would sting. Grandma's voice echoed softly in my memory. One day, it will matter more than money. I now understood what she had meant. It wasn't just about coins or savings. It was about respect, trust, and the quiet power of foresight. They had destroyed that trust, and now, slowly, I would make them understand the weight of what they had lost. The storm outside mirrored the one in my heart, steady and insistent. I was no longer a child crushed by betrayal. I was a guardian of memory, a silent force, planting seeds of reckoning. And when the day of reckoning arrived, it would be perfect, just as Grandma would have wanted. The day came quietly, without warning. It was not marked by storms or raised voices, but by an almost imperceptible shift in the rhythm of the house. Dad had arrived home in high spirits, proud of a deal he claimed was foolproof, unaware that the hidden currents beneath his feet were stronger than he could imagine. I watched from the staircase, calm, composed, carrying the weight of months spent nurturing patience, observation, and strategy. The savings book lay on my desk, open and gleaming in the afternoon sunlight, each page a testament to care, foresight, and love ignored. I had positioned it carefully next to his financial statements, leaving it conspicuously within reach but not within immediate notice, a quiet trap of consequence. This was the culmination of everything. My grandmother's gift, my parents' indifference, my resolve. Dad hummed as he rifled through papers, his confidence radiating in waves. He had no suspicion. He never suspected that the very object he had once flung into the trash now held the power to confront him with the truth of his carelessness. I remained silent, letting him linger over his triumphs, waiting for the precise moment when awareness would strike. Mom hovered nearby, fidgeting with a dish towel, her eyes flicking toward the book with an unmistakable flicker of guilt. She had pieced together the subtle reminders I had left over the past weeks, the notes, the photographs, the carefully worded questions, and she had realized finally the depth of her own negligence. She didn't speak, but her expression conveyed everything: sorrow, shame, and a quiet plea that her husband might finally understand. It took only a second. Dad reached for the top sheet of what he thought were his investment notes, and his fingers brushed against the leather-bound book. His brow furrowed, his hand froze, and for the first time in months, his laughter vanished. The room seemed to hold its breath as he picked it up, opened it, and saw the meticulous entries of Grandma's life savings preserved intact. The air thickened with silence. I watched as recognition dawned, slow and staggering. His eyes scanned the pages, his mouth opening, closing, searching for words he could not find. This is," he stammered, voice catching. "Yes," I said quietly, my tone steady but carrying the weight of every memory and betrayal. "This is what you threw away, this is what you ignored. It wasn't about the money, Dad. It was about respect. It was about trust. It was about the one person who believed in all of us, even when we didn't deserve it." The words seemed to strike him like a physical blow. His hands shook, gripping the book as though it were the last lifeline to something he had lost before even knowing its value. Mom stepped closer, her voice soft, trembling. We didn't realize." I shook my head slowly. "You didn't see, you never did, but now, maybe you will understand what it means to disregard something sacred, to throw away not just a book, but the love and faith of someone who believed in you." Dad sank into a chair, the leather book cradled in his hands, the reality of his carelessness settling over him like a heavy fog. I didn't gloat, I didn't laugh. Revenge, I realized, was not in satisfaction or anger. It was in truth revealed, in lessons learned the hard way. And as he traced Grandma's handwriting with trembling fingers, I felt a quiet justice, the kind that could not be taken away. Mom reached out, tentatively touching his shoulder, and for the first time in months, a fragile silence fell over the room. The storm had passed outside, leaving the sky clear, and in the stillness, a sense of reckoning lingered, heavy but necessary. I looked at them both, my heart a mixture of sorrow and relief. I had preserved Grandma's gift, I had honored her memory, and I had made them face the consequences of indifference without destroying them. That was the sweetness of revenge, not cruelty, but clarity. A chance for understanding that came too late to erase the past, but just in time to shape the future. As the sun set, casting golden light over the pages, I realized that I had grown stronger, sharper, and more compassionate, even in anger. Grandma's gift had been more than money. It had been a lesson in patience, justice, and love. And through it, I had learned that the quietest storms often leave the deepest marks, and the sweetest revenge is the one that teaches without breaking completely. The savings book rested between us, no longer hidden, no longer discarded, a silent witness to betrayal and redemption. And in that moment, I knew, some gifts are meant to be preserved not just for what they contain, but for what they reveal about the hearts of those who hold them.